So, right off the bat, relationships are like the foundational point, just like the notches to an arrow. Next, Pastor David is going to talk about what I like to call the feathery part of the arrow, or as my dad says, it's called fletching. Thank you. See, I called my dad and I'm like, hey, is this like it says in the movies, right? Like, can we like tear off one of those and it like do a really cool like left turn all of a sudden? He goes, no, son, no, it's nothing like that. So anyway, but Pastor David's going to talk about now modeling and intentionality, and I'm going to hand out these papers as he comes up. Thank you, Pastor David.
Hey.
Good morning.
I've got pictures for those that don't like words. This is a kind of actually turned out to be a compilation effort. So, I text my kids and I said, okay, guys, what did Mom and I do right? And I got to make sure I'm in the center of this thing. Anyway, the thing that really is important is to actually hear from people around you what you're actually doing. That's the true measure. You may think you're a good boss, but you really need to ask your employees. You may think you're a good teacher, but you really need to ask the people that you're teaching. And so I thought I'd ask my kids, and so I've got some of that here. I also incorporated the things that we actually did. I'm a very practical person, of course. I believe in actual behavior, not concept. And so, but there were two things that frightened me to death when I started as a parent. One was all of the preacher jokes that I've heard people tell about preachers' kids. And, those are funny, I guess. But they are based in some reality, and so they scared me. Because, frankly, I'd rather not be a pastor than to ruin my kids. And I remember G.H. Surratt, whose name actually is G.H. Surratt, because his parents were sharecroppers and they couldn't spell, and so they just named all their kids A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And so G.H. told us, he said, look, fellas, if you win the world and lose your family, it'll be a poor exchange. And I remember him saying that. The other thing is, of course, coming from my own family background, my dad was married 5 times, my mom was married 3, my dad's not my dad, all that stuff. Living with a lot of turmoil and disruption and difficulty and so on and so forth. So I didn't want to make that mistake, So I had those two things, really big things that I wanted to do well. I knew I was born again, but I also knew you got to do something. There's got to be a reality to that. And so I have never parented out of pastoring. Does that make sense? I've always parented out of my own life. And Jason was referring to it a lot. And so Pammy gave me Titus 2, which is something that she has really held on to as a parent. But as for you, teach what accords with sound doctrine. Older men are to be sober-minded, dignified, self-controlled, sound in faith and love and in steadfastness. I read that really fast, but that's not easy. Okay, just because I read it fast doesn't mean it happens like that. Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. Likewise, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. Show yourselves in all respects to be a model of good works. And in your teaching, show integrity, dignity, and sound speech that cannot be condemned, so that an opponent may be put to shame, having nothing evil to say about us. So, that's the bottom line, just like Jason said, is that your life has to actually have what you want your kids to get. And I've learned a long time ago that my kids will get what I am, not what I say. That's what they'll get. So with that in mind, there's a few things I just want to point out, and they're there for you to look at later. Intentional bonding. I didn't know about bonding until I adopted 2 children. And, they taught us in the classes and taught us and all that stuff. But I came to find out that bonding is huge. Bonding is huge. It's a huge deal. And my 2 youngest children came from a very emotional, distraught life, both in their parent home and in their foster home. So, and matter of fact, their foster home was worse than their parent home. People went to jail, prison. So, I didn't know anything about this stuff, okay? And I want to say to all of us, you need to be real intentional about bonding to your kids. And that means that you are intentional about touching them and kissing them and loving them and saying words to them and encouraging them and all that stuff. So even like, with my son Maddie, even though he's bigger, I used to hold him on my lap. He's a big kid. And I hold him on my lap, and I hug him and kiss on him and stuff like that. And I did that, because I needed to make a bond with him. And probably when he broke his neck in Ohio, that's when I knew the bond was there. Because he called me Daddy for the first time, and he called Pam Mommy for the first time. And he screamed it for about an hour, on the floor, in the ambulance, and in the triage room. So I knew, that something was going on. He's screaming for us, while they're cutting all his clothes off and doing everything. So, the bottom line is that intentional bonding, and you got to pay attention to this, okay? And so you got to know your own style. What's your own style? And think about that, because that really does make a difference. And bonding happens, it has to happen intentionally, Now, in my family, we may be messed up with drugs and alcohol, but we are gregarious and touching people, in my family. So that's just kind of, a blessing. That's, what they do after that might be a problem. we're definitely a bonded family. But also purposeful events, okay? So for instance, throughout our life, we decided to homeschool. Sarah was in the 4th grade when we decided that. She had her best year ever, actually. But there were some issues like, for instance, mobility and, when you're handicapped, it makes your life tough. Even though she had a principal who only had 1 arm, and so he was very sensitive. But he couldn't fix all the kids in the school. And so, that was a real issue for us. So we decided to homeschool. I have come to believe that parents are what matter. Homeschool, private school, public school, it's parents that matter. I've watched this now for 31 years, because my oldest is 31, next one's 28, next one's 25, then there's just a 1-year gap, and he's 24, and Esther's 21. And so, I've watched this for a long time, and I've seen all of these families and all of these kids, and I've watched and seen. It really comes down to the parents. It really comes down to the parents, or whoever's standing in the parent role. Because it doesn't have to be the birth parent. It can be somebody else. So purposeful events for us, we always had field day. Okay, so my day off was an intentional day of being together. And, we'd go over and watch the cows get milked, or we'd go find out about the Indian stuff, or we'd go down and look at little doll houses in Kansas City, And there are lots of things. Now, another thing I've always done, I've tried to spend intentional time with my kids. So, for instance, I bought a membership to the golf course in Savannah, and the reason I did was not because I wanted to be a big deal on the golf course or among golfers, but because I wanted to spend time with my kids. And so, somebody loaned me a golf cart, and so I put Sarah behind the wheel, which gave her tremendous success. When you can't walk, you can drive yourself, it's pretty good. Hannah was there with her, and they fought the entire time about who was going to drive. So we used to tell them, say, you got to be quiet because you're going to make these people mad. They kind of like to be, they get all upset when they're golfing and little girls are screaming. So, and then Seth and I would walk, see, and then it was just a fun time. I'd play 5 holes if I had time. I'd play 8 holes, whatever. One time, and Seth will tell you this, is just one of those meaningful moments. They had plowed this field, or not plowed it, but harvested this field that was right next to the golf course, and there was literally like 300 balls on the ground of all these golfers that had missed. And so Seth and I were like, we went over there, and I have 2 boxes to this day of golf balls that we picked up off the ground. And, my point is that, daddy-daughter dates, being together, Pam would tell you that themed events. So she does intentional kind of things where she wants to get across something to the kids, and she'll get them away, she'll go, and this is real intentional. She goes all the way down to the color of the plates, and she'll have little questions and doing stuff like that. Maybe that's the teacher in her and so on. But another thing that we always did is we always tried to make a point of whatever we were doing. So everything you do has a lesson to it of some kind. So those purposeful and themed events. Also, not letting your emotions be counterproductive. Now, I can't emphasize this enough. You guys know how much I am on relational wisdom, emotional intelligence, and actually handling your emotions. You cannot overemphasize the importance of your anger. Cannot. And when you lose it, you really lose it in a lot of ways. So, I would say probably I had to learn to parent in a whole different way when Maddie came along. I had parented my birth children, and that was different, And it didn't matter what you did, Maddie. That boy could take it all. And so what I did with my 3 birth children was not going to work for him. And so I had to deal with my emotional life, because he would take you to the nth degree, and so in actuality, what I had to do is I had to actually let him see my own pain, not the expression of anger, but my actual pain. And what I would do actually is that when he got in trouble, he had to slap me. And that sounds freaky, but it's the only thing that ever worked. And really getting a hold of his heart. But so my anger, and I learned this lesson from my kids. I'd get mad, and who'd want to be with me? Because I got mad every time that we were together, because we'd get in the car, and guess what? There'd be Chick-fil-A laying everywhere, all this stuff, and I had an expectation of a car, so on and so forth. Everything's out of place, everything should be in its place. And so I had to learn that, my emotions are making it impossible for my family to enjoy being with me. And most people you don't pay attention to your emotions. You don't. You just do them. Because it's habitual. But you need to really actually kind of stand back and take a look at what it's like to be with you. And would you want to be with you? Well, I realized my kids are all sitting there crying. For the first time in my life, I was like, what's wrong with you people? And the God said, what's wrong with you? And I was like, oh, okay. So I began to deal with that. Nothing is being consistent. Being consistent. Day in and day out. Day in and day out. Day in and day out. So habits are really big. Habits are really big. This is one of the things I picked up one time driving along. It was on Focus on the Family. And it's give them a bigger reason than I told you so. or I told you to. So I began early on in my life as a parent, I began to give my kids, look, what does God want you to do? What does this mean to God? What's going on with God? I didn't work from my base, because guess what? At age 13 or 14, they're going to be you. Okay? And who makes them an adult? Anybody know? Who starts puberty? Not you. Ain't nobody signed up for that one. All right, it's time for you to have a deeper voice and hair on your body and so on and so forth. God starts that. This is God. And so I began to realize I need to introduce them to the one that made them and the one that will rule them, the one they have to be accountable to. So that when I'm not around, they got somebody else to deal with. So, I didn't tell them, you got to do this because your dad's a pastor. That's the worst reason in the world. Okay, and whatever your job is or whatever your persona is, don't base your relationship with your children and what it's about on your persona. Okay, base it on your God. So that's one of the things always eating meals together. This is a lost art. It's kind of sad, but we always ate meals together. Always. It don't matter who fixes it. Okay. Chick-fil-A can fix it, but at least you sit down and eat it together, and that teaches a lot of things. That teaches a lot of things. And to actually talk. And so, for instance, I put a couple things here, these little pictures here. We did Josh McDowell's Family Devotions 1 and 2. And we read them, and the kids would read them, and we did that. We went through 2 books. And then also, we had this little loaf of bread with scripture verses. And they were in King James Version, which gave my kids a historical, experience. They'd never heard King James talk. So, they would read the verse, and then we would pray that verse. And we did that at our table. And so, eating meals together is a big deal. Prayer at night, over meals, and in special moments. Just praying. Just real prayer. Real prayer. And because if prayer's not there, then God's not there. Also, devotions and Bible study. So we would talk about the Bible. We would look at different parts. And so, for instance, like Adventures in Odyssey. I don't know how much I spent in Adventures in Odyssey, but I spent a ton. My kids to this day listen to Adventures in Odyssey. And the way I picked that up is that a friend ran a radio station in St. Louis, and he was bootlegging it to his friend. And so I was like, what's so important that a guy that runs the entire power plant of the utility company wants to listen to it, And so I actually began to take a look at it. Started off, of course, with cassettes, and then went to CDs and so on and so forth. But my kids listened to it every night. Every single night. And they would fight over who gets which one and so on and so forth. And then I always had to make sure they put them back so they take care of them and all that. And I have them to this day. I'm pretty sure I spent at least $1,000, maybe $1,500 over the years just buying them and buying them and buying them. And then when we went to Colorado one time on vacation, we went to Colorado Springs and went to, what's it called? Wits End. There you go. That's right. And, had a drink there at the little, anyway, all that stuff. To this day. And, one of our favorites is actually 2 of them. Is one about a pastor's family, and the other one is about cheap vacations. You can camp in your living room. You can get noises and have crickets and all that stuff. Do it right in your living room. And that led to us actually camping out in the backyard. Always attending worship no matter where we are. I never miss worship, no matter where I am. I've worshiped in lots of chapels and lots of hospitals. Sometimes by myself, sometimes with other people. One time with Maddie in Ohio. And it was just he and I. and the chaplain. And obviously people hadn't actually come there very much because the chaplain looked in and he goes, "Oh, okay, I'll be right back." Apparently, nobody shows up in this big room. And then he goes, "Do you mind if I come over and just kind of sit by you guys and not, at the podium?" I'm like, "Fine." And then I remember doing worship, just me and a bunch of sick people in KU. And, my point is, one time we stopped and, like we would have to go somewhere and we would do something. And we would worship on the way. And we stopped at this little town called Concordia, okay, which, if you know anything about Lutherans, Concordia is a big word. And so, anyway, we went to church, went to the first church we found there, and it was a Lutheran church. Turns out it was their 150th anniversary. So it was packed. Also, it turned out it was a 2-hour worship. And there was no room except for where? On the front row. With my handicapped daughter and my less than cordial mother. So, on the front row we go. And then we realized, oh my gosh, this thing's 2 hours long. And we have to get up in front of everybody and leave. But anyway, the point is that no matter what, whether you're, vacationing in the mountains or sitting on the beach or wherever you are, always worship. And then, same in private as in public. Same in private as in public. And, again, that's intentionality. Spending time doing what they want, not what I want. I learned that from Coach McCartney. He talked about having his kids on the sidelines at Colorado University and how that really wasn't actually being with his kids. He thought it was a big deal. But the fact is that sitting and doing a tea party in the bedroom is a whole lot more than sitting on the sidelines at that time, big 8-team event. Also, music choices and meaning. So, we always talked about music and what it meant. What's that teaching, because they're gonna get exposed to stuff, but you have to help them understand, is this good? Is this bad? Because here's one thing to remember about entertainment. There's no such thing as value-neutral entertainment. No such thing. So at every movie we go to, I always want to stand up in the middle of the movie and go, "Sermon!" Free Willy. There's a sermon right there. Everybody come forward, come to the decision point of animal treatment, stuff like that. Everything has a meaning. So I try to always help my kids. Music and film. Now, the next thing that I have here are my kids' actual words, okay? So here's Esther. What Mom and Dad do right. Patience. Not freaking out about mistakes. Not freaking out about mistakes. I wouldn't say that was always that way. Doing instead of talk only. Now these are their words, okay? This is their words to me. Seth said, Keith Green. Okay, Keith Green is a Christian artist. And I got a lot of my early discipleship from Keith Green. And I probably would have actually gone and been with Keith if he hadn't died. I really seriously consider it. RAs. Who knows what RAs are? Okay. Handful. The rest of us, Royal Ambassadors. Okay, it's a Baptist thing. It's like Baptist Boy Scouts kind of thing. But anyway, Mr. Bruce in a room with a bunch of wood in St. Louis. That's what Seth's talking about, actually. Bow range. That's me taking Seth, learning to use a bow and so on. In St. Louis. Yeah, a little bit bare bow. And we go on and spend time just teaching him how to shoot. Being homeschooled. And again, that's Seth's deal. I think he liked it. Dinner together. Making me hang out with old people. Now, why would that be important? Because it teaches you to be diverse and not just be, your own group. So what he's actually probably talking about, I don't know, you don't have to ask him, but I used to make him go on daytimer trips with us. I call them cheek pinching days, So And we used to do that, Also, making me work through college. So, I've helped my kids in lots of ways, of course, like any parent, but I didn't pay for their education. I didn't. I grew up with a lot of wealthy people in Boulder, Colorado. It's very wealthy. And I found out that spoiling kids is not a good idea. And money's usually 3 generations long. One makes it, the other spends it, and the other, goes in debt trying to get it back, I guess, is the way it goes. But the bottom line is that just really helping my kids understand you got to work for what you have. Teaching me about guns, and that means you don't point a muzzle at nobody. So even as a kid, my kids, if they took a toy gun and pointed at somebody, I'd take it away from them. Because you don't do that. You don't do that. Making me have sisters, which one of the other girls actually corrected and said, letting you have sisters. So we had a little discussion about that point. And then apologizing when you're wrong. And, I've made mistakes in my life. And if you're not willing to actually intentionally, openly, accurately admit you're wrong. Now, admitting you're wrong is not the only thing, is it? No. You got to change. Okay, because if you come back and admit it for the 33rd time, they know this means nothing. This means nothing. Raising me to love Jesus, help me accept who he is. And you can't do that. Then also Hannah's words, I thought it was kind of funny. She numbered them. You actually lived it for yourselves. You didn't just tell me to. Number 2, when we got in trouble, you didn't focus on what we did as much as our heart. And that's one of the things I've always done with my kids. I've always asked them, okay, now wait a minute. What are you really believing? What are you really following? What are you really doing? What's really going on? Why did you do that? And not the behavior itself, but what they actually believe. Now, I can tell you right now, if you don't ask your kids what they believe, you don't know what they believe. And if you don't let them tell you, you're not going to know. Okay? And then also, when bad things were happening in the world, we weren't afraid to talk about it with us. No sin was off the table. We discussed uncomfortable topics in the biblical understanding of it. So, I always talk to my kids about what's going on, what this behavior, that behavior, so on and so on. I talked about my own problems, my own issues of life, and so on and so forth. So, and then Maddie, and here's Maddie's words. He's got a lot of words. He texted all that, too. He told me, there's a lot to say, but I'm going to have to limit it because I'm texting.
David, if this had been shorter, I would have said you lied. Your kids didn't write this, but knowing this, seeing this is Matthew.
That's Maddie. Anyway, Maddie said, and he's just being really transparent, he says, when I was telling my testimony at church the other day, he's in Orlando, I just talked about Jesus and what he's done in my life. But the thing is, most of what he has done in my life has been his doing through you and Mom. You had to change the entire way you disciplined me. You had to adjust on the fly. You had to earn my trust because so many people that were supposed to love and care for me took advantage of me. That's a huge deal and has played a vital role in the man I am today. I am a man rather than a boy pretending to be a man. That's an emphasis I've always made with my kids. Because of Christ in my life. But Christ used you and Mama to raise me into a man. My bonding issues with Mom are no longer a problem because you were patient with me. I did not make it easy on any of you. I put my family through, you know what. But you knew that if you continued to stay the course and did not give up on me like everyone else had, that I would be okay. You always told me, Dad, that one day I'm going to grow up and be a better man than you. I still don't believe that, but you telling me that alone shows how much you trusted God and how much you believed in me. I can go on, but I think sometimes you and Mom, Seth, Sarah, Hannah, and even Esther, to an extent, do not realize the impact this family's had on my soul and the life I lead, just by simply believing in me. The other thing, Mom and Dad, that I don't talk about, but that I love, and that really gets to me, is that every morning since I can remember, Dad, you were in your chair with a cup of coffee, 4 shots, by the way. 24 ounces of water. Anyway, these are my habits. Dad, you were in your chair with a cup of coffee while listening and reading the Word. Mom studying your lesson every Saturday night in the old chair that was by your bed. That's huge. That's what it's all about. You don't know how much that proved to me as a kid that you are for real about God and about loving me. Then I gave you some pictures. Okay, so like, there are things around our house that are intentional. Okay, intentional. So, the first one there, of course, is a Baptist hymnal. His utmost, my utmost for his highest, or something like that. I forget the exact title now.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Oswald Chambers and so on. Also, there's several little pieces there, just reading things. And then the next picture is the Pilgrim's Progress. And I've used the Pilgrim's Progress throughout my whole life. It's an allegory of true discipleship and what it means to live your life for Christ and what issues you will actually face and deal with. And, one of the things, next to the Bible, it is the largest produced English-speaking book in the world. It's huge. And with my kids, we read that. I had tapes on that, kind of like the Adventure and Odyssey type thing, and talked about the people, Mr. Worldly Wise Man, Vanity Fair, all those kinds of things that are in there in program, and how he became Christian, and so on and so forth. There's lots there. I collect those. So if you find one, bring it home to me. Also, just things around our house. So for instance, there's a mezuzah. Inside the mezuzah is the Shema, and that is at the doorpost of my house, and it is a very important part. I've been working on a necklace, but I haven't quite gotten to the place of getting a good chain. So it's like a choker right now. So, and those kinds of things really matter. That's why, like when people get tattoos and they think about what it says, and you really pay attention to that. This is more, kind of some stuff with Pammy. There's an old telephone, and on it is a Bible that's falling apart, often belongs to someone who isn't. Okay, so those kinds of messages throughout the house. There in our dining room, in everything give thanks. And there's lots of those kinds of words. We had verses that we put in every one of the kids' rooms that we thought matched them, and to encourage them, that would be, in our room it's not a verse, but it's the same. Grow old with me, and the best is yet to be. Kiss me every morning. And anyway, that. And then here's one that's really big for me, and this is one of my favorite things. This is a picture of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. And that's a big part for me because it takes everybody. Most pictures you see of the quote-unquote Holy Family are just Mary and Jesus. And I knew that I was important too. And I knew Joseph was important. You can't have Jesus without Joseph. And I just want to say that was an important part. So the whole family, and notice, Dad's got his axe, and he's got his stuff, and he's bringing home some fruit, and so on and so forth. But those intentional kind of things. So be intentional. All right, thanks.
Real quick, we're going to take a break here in just a second, but I want to have my wife come and tell you guys a story. In regards to intentionality and modeling, I think one thing that we really have to also, particularly with those of us who have sons, how it's really, really important that we intentionally model purity. And so I want to pass it over to my wife and let her tell you a story of just with our son, Noah. Go ahead.
So, all of you, most of you at least, have probably seen our oldest son. He's 9. And we had a conversation, Noah and I don't actually remember what brought it all up, but we were talking about girls and giving them privacy and what that means, and how as being a gentleman, which Noah really likes the idea of being a gentleman. He always opens the door for me and closes it, and he's real sweet in that way. But we talked about how if you want to be a gentleman and a godly man, then you have to learn to give girls their privacy. And he's young. I mean, we haven't entered into puberty and all that fun stuff yet. But if he doesn't learn it now, it's going to be harder when he gets older. So we're trying to instill some things now. So one of the things is when we go through the mall and you go past Victoria's Secret, Noah does this. The whole way. He'll just stare at his feet as he goes by. And we were walking, and Logan was with us this time, and Logan is doing this. And I don't know, he was thinking about something or whatever, but he's walking all over, and Noah's doing this. And I'm looking at the two of them, and I'm going, Logan. What? Look at your shoes. Why do I need to look at my shoes? Because we were walking past the lingerie store. Look at your shoes like your child is doing. And he goes, oh, okay. So then we have both of them doing this walk past the store. But we talked about it and how it's important for Logan as the dad to model what we want Noah and Eli and Micah to do as the sons. And, in instances like this, that means giving girls privacy, even when maybe they don't understand why privacy is important. But you as a godly man know that. And so you sometimes have to give people things that they don't even know that they need, because that's being godly. And that's being intentional as parents to teach them and instill in them habits and values that will hopefully last through their lifetime and help them be who God intended them to be.
Yep.
So.
Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll meet back here in 10:25. Thank you, guys.
As a